Oh, we got online people. Right.
Oh, yeah. You have online people. True.
All right. Can everybody online hear me?
Yes, we can.
I don't know.
Can you hear us?
Yes. Yes, we can hear
I can't hear them. All right. If y'all have any problems online, just give Stacy a text and she'll let me know what's going on. We're going into the second chapter of Daniel this morning. And so remember, the reason that I'm doing Daniel is we can't just take a look at Revelation and then understand everything that John is trying to give us in Revelation, unless we have the same kind of background that the Jewish people had. They would know all of these accounts from the Old Testament. I mean, that's everything that they grew up with. And they would know them inside and out to the point that they had them memorized and they were able to recite them. Okay. So much better than we could ever even attempt to. There's only one preacher that I ever know, that I've ever known, that memorized all of the sermon passages that he was going to use. And he would say, everybody turn in your Bible to such and such, and he would just recite it. And he was, I think that was Pastor Kurt Everett from First Baptist Church, way back. And he always amazed me how he memorized entire passages. I can't. I couldn't do it. But the Jewish knew all of the Old Testament accounts, so that when they hear something new and somebody is referring back to something, that whole account in the Old Testament would just pop into their head, and they would have all of that background immediately. Well, we as Western Christians, we don't have that. We don't have the culture. We don't have the history to draw on. So when we try to just jump into Revelation to understand everything that it has to give us, we're missing most of the pieces. And we can't figure out what is literal, what is figurative, what's referring back to something else, what's hyperbole, and what is prophecy. We can't make the jump, and we have a hard time. And then we're looking at Revelation as this weird kind of fantasy thing. How could this ever happen? We're just going to have faith because it's in the Bible. But there is a lot more understanding to be had. To really get it, we have to jump back to Isaiah and Jeremiah and Daniel and Ezekiel. So I was going to just give you the important passages, and I'm like, oh no, Daniel's too cool. And we missed it when we were doing our children's Bible stories for adults. So last week was introduction. And so you heard where Daniel was originally from. And he had 3 friends that all 4 of them were taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar, who was a general of Babylon. And when they were taken captive, they weren't treated as slaves. What happened instead? They were put into training. They were put into training. They're put in school to learn all of the Babylonian ways, because what was the idea of the Babylonian conquest? Don't kill anybody, just retrain them, send them home, and let them say how great we are. That's the idea here. Now I'm going to put some of that timeline together for you a little bit better this week. The reason is, I think Jacob Dredla said, he asked a question last week that kind of caught me, and I'm like, oh, I don't have my timeline quite right. So I had to do some research in order to get the timeline right. So I'm going to take care of that for y'all this morning. So when we get into chapter 2 of Daniel, we see the first of Daniel's prophetic messages. And this is one of those messages that ties into Revelation. So you will be referring back to this for the rest of the fall as we go. Well, that too, for the rest of the fall as we talk about Revelation. So Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, but he couldn't remember the dream. when he woke up. He knew that he was very bothered by it. Very bothered. But he couldn't remember what it was. So here we go, Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king, may the king live forever, kind of a common greeting for the king. Tell your servants the dream, and we'll interpret it. So first of all, the first verse here kind of messed with me, because in my mind, Nebuchadnezzar was already king when he came and invaded Jerusalem, sieged Jerusalem, and then took these influencers, the best of the best, cream of the crop, to Babylon with him. Nebuchadnezzar defeated Necho II, who was the previous king, in fall of 605 BC. So this point in the dream would be 604, 603, right? So it was the second year of his reign, so 603 at the latest. Daniel was also kidnapped in 605. So he wasn't king yet. He was about to be king, but he wasn't king yet. And then Daniel had to be trained for 3 years. So that would be like 602. So is there a timeline error that's happening here? We've got some problems, because if it's only the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Daniel's entering the story here, but he hasn't finished his training yet. And that's supposed to be 3 years. And so I couldn't make it work. So Nebuchadnezzar kidnapped Daniel in 605. He became king in 605. So what was going on is Nebuchadnezzar was this big general, and he was going around conquering areas for the then sitting king. But then he gathered so much strength, he said, I could take that king. But he had Daniel as a captive with him already when he went back to Babylon and took down that king. Okay, so that's what's going on. Now, this is where I answered Jacob wrong last week. The sacking of Jerusalem was in 587 BC. That's much later. It's like 15 years later. So what happened was, the first time Nebuchadnezzar came around, he didn't destroy Jerusalem. He came in, busted in, nighttime raids kind of thing, took some people and left, but left Jerusalem standing. It wasn't until 587 BC that he completely tore up Jerusalem. So Jeremiah's prophecy that I mentioned last week, which was referencing directly Nebuchadnezzar, is going to come in. Nebuchadnezzar is going to destroy. Nebuchadnezzar is going to take your children and make them slaves. That wasn't after the fact, like I had mentioned last week. It was a prophecy about what was going to happen in 587, 15 years later. So I had totally messed that up last week. So that's my correction for last week.
I had a confusion about them being taken captive and then Nebuchadnezzar's reign in the second year. It's like, I didn't understand he was a general first.
Yeah. So he was going around conquering lands and coming into Jerusalem and taking this first bunch of captives was part of that conquest. But he didn't destroy Jerusalem at that time. It wasn't until 587 that he destroyed Jerusalem. Okay, so that's the first thing that I need to straighten out. The second thing is here in chapter 2, verse 1, where it says, in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. So now he's king. So you have to understand the linguistics of the book of Daniel. Daniel is a weird book because chapter 1 is written in Hebrew. That's the religious language. Chapters 2 through 7 is written in Aramaic, which is the language of commerce that everybody in the region spoke, kind of like English is in the world today. If you want to do trade with somebody that's not part of your country, go to English, because pretty much everybody knows English. So Aramaic was that language back then. Everybody just kind of spoke it.
Why in verse 4 it says that astrologers answer the king in Aramaic?
Yeah.
Why is that part of the narrative?
Yeah. So that's important. And why is it part of the narrative? It's because we need to know that in order to properly understand Daniel. So chapter 1 is in Hebrew, a religious language, primarily for Jewish people. Chapters 2 through 7 is in Aramaic, and that's meant for Gentiles to learn and understand. And then chapters 8 through 12 jumps back to Hebrew. Okay. Now I'm going to give you more about the importance of that language later when we shift to chapter 8. But understanding that Hebrew is how this starts, that sets up something very important for our understanding. Hebrew is a story language, and it's better in the oral tradition. Okay. It's meant to be heard and engage both sides of your brain. When someone speaks Hebrew, it's kind of sing-songy in the way that it sounds. And so it engages both the artistic side of your brain and the logic side of your brain, which helps you memorize it better. You can memorize a song easier than you can memorize a paragraph of written text. It's because you're engaging both sides of your brain. Okay. Hebrew is that way. It's a sing-songing language, and it helps for memorization. So that's why it's still used today in the religious services. Okay.
The Torah.
Yeah. So the Torah, Talmud, all the teachings in Jewish church, synagogue, or temple is going to be in Hebrew because it's easier to absorb and then tell somebody else. You can recount it, part of that oral tradition. So it's great on the ears. When the stories were told, it was for the purpose of memorization and perfect retelling. All right. So because of this, the stories were organized in such a way to help with the memorization. An example would be Genesis 1:1. So Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But then Genesis 1:2 says, now the earth was void and formless. Wait, that messed up people a lot, because Genesis 1:1, we've got the heavens and the earth created. Genesis 1:2, there's nothing in the creation. What happened? Did it get all destroyed? Did we have a creation already and God wiped it out and then started over in verse 2? There's whole religions built on that. Kabbalah is a religion that's built on the idea of an entire creation that God made that didn't pertain to us. And then he destroys it. And that's where Ishtar and Mother Earth and Lilith Fair, all that stuff, that's where all of that comes from. And then in Genesis 1:2, now he begins the creation that's all about us. No, that is a total misunderstanding of how Jewish storytelling works. Jewish storytelling is kind of like the Ballad of the Beverly Hillbillies. Let me tell you a story about a man named Jed. That's the main idea. And then the storyteller goes in. He worked all day, barely kept his family fed, right? And so the first sentence is like what we learned in English class. It's the topic sentence, okay? So in Genesis 1:1, that's the topic sentence. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now you lean in and find out how he did it. Then that's the rest of Genesis. This is Hebrew in Daniel. It works the same way. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 1, in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he had this problem with dreams. Well, this is a recurring theme that lasted throughout his reign. And so now we're going to look at a particular time. So when we get into Daniel 2, 2, Daniel 2:2, then we get specifics of this particular case. All right, does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so Daniel 2:1 is a topic sentence. He was plagued by bad dreams for a very long time. And Daniel 2:2 is now, here is one of those times.
Wait, Daniel had the bad dream?
No, Nebuchadnezzar did. Yep. All right, so Nebuchadnezzar commanded the wise men to tell him the dream. I know I had a bad dream. It was terrible. I woke up and I remember that it was a terrible dream. I don't remember what it was. So wise men, tell me what my dream was. It wasn't to interpret this dream that I had. Here's the dream. Remember, that's what Pharaoh did with Joseph in Egypt. Remember? I had this dream. It was this. Tell me what it means. No, this is even more so. Nebuchadnezzar is saying, tell me the dream and then tell me what it means. But he couldn't remember. So I used to think, oh, it was a test. He was testing them. How could I believe their translation or their interpretation if they can't even tell me what the dream is? No, Nebuchadnezzar couldn't even remember what the dream was. Okay. So Daniel chapter 2, verses 5-7, the king replied to the astrologers, this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have to cut you into pieces and your houses will be turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Once more, they replied, King, tell us what the dream was, and we will interpret it for you. Then the king answered, I'm certain you're just trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me. All right, so his anger rising, what threat did Nebuchadnezzar make? If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you
Torn from them to them.
cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. Okay, so this is what's going on. So verse 10, the astrologers answered the king. This is important. There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. So basically, they're taking a stance and saying, no king has ever done this, no matter how great he was. So basically, they're saying, King, you're wrong in asking us to do this. And so at this point,
He's like off of their head.
yeah.
He's the king of art.
Yeah. So what admission did the frightened magicians make about their inability to reveal the unknown? There is nobody on earth who can do what the king asks. Only the gods can do this. Little g, gods. Now in Babylon, they had lots of gods. Okay, kind of like the Egyptians. There were lots of gods. And so only the gods have the power to read people's minds, to remember this dream that the king can't even remember. Okay?
Well, he can make something up because he wouldn't know.
That wouldn't work though, because if they make up a story, first of all, you can kind of, that's not as frightening as I felt when I woke up. This was something worse. Okay. So verse 12, this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death.
Wise man pile.
Yes. Now, people who say that this is a made up story say, well, the timeline's messed up here because Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were already part of the wise men. And so that would be 4 or 5 years later. And this said it was in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. And so the timeline doesn't work. But remember the Hebrew storytelling. Okay. These dreams started in Nebuchadnezzar's second year, but he was plagued with dreams from then on. And this is just an account that was sometime later than the second year. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. So why would the decree include Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
Because they were wise men in training.
At the very least,
Yeah.
they were being trained by the wise men. And if the wise men are all wiped out, well, we don't want any more of them. So we're going to wipe them out too. No, it probably would just be a school of 30 to 50, I would guess. Okay. Or if they were already elevated to the position of service to the king, like we learned about last week, they were just part of the group of wise men, astrologers. Remember what I said the word was? They were magi.
Oh, yeah.
So these are magi, the same group of type of people that came to Jesus's birth 1,000 years later. Okay. They were wise. They were wise. Verse 14, when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact, something I don't have. Thank you. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. Why would he explain?
Because Daniel had been kind to him and you reap what you sow.
So remember last week with the whole food thing, they're supposed to feed them off the king's table, this food that was sacrificed to idols. And Daniel said, no, we don't want to eat that. Just bring us vegetables and water, and we'll prove to you that we're going to be better than everybody else as far as health, right? And Arioch is like, no. If I gamble with this, the king's going to come after me because you need to be healthy. And they said, no, just try us for 10 days. We'll prove to you that our God is strong. He'll keep us strong and you'll be just fine. And so they had already built a relationship. Daniel had a good trust that he had built up with Arioch. So now he's talking to him. Hey, why are you killing everybody? Yeah, why are you going to kill me? And Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. And at this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time. This is cool because one of the things that Nebuchadnezzar said to the wise men, you're just trying to stall for time. But yet when Daniel goes in there, he asks for time to interpret the dream, and Nebuchadnezzar gives him time.
God's with him.
Because God's with him. Okay. So when Daniel learned that his life and the lives of all the wise men were in peril, he went straight to the king. And what request did he put before him in verse 16? Time. He asked for time. Okay. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who all got new names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. So what did Daniel do with his time? Did he go to the library and read books about the history of Babylon?
No, he would sleep.
He didn't even have a Bible study. What he did is he organized a prayer group. He had this problem brought to him. He grabbed his buddies and he said, hey, let's pray. They prayed and then they went to sleep for the night. And then during the night, God revealed a vision to Daniel. What was that vision? Okay. The secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision, according to verse 19. It's different than a dream. A night vision's different than a dream. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah. So that means this is still during the training.
Yeah, mine says captive, yeah.
He's not in this service yet. So this is going to be in the first 3 years. We've narrowed down the timeline a little bit now. So it's going to be in the first 3 years of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. I found this man from the exiles of Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar. So he got a new name too. It wasn't just Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that got new names. Daniel got a new name too, Belteshazzar. Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? So here's a side note from last week. People were asking what their new names meant. Okay. So old name, Daniel. That means God is my judge. That's Yahweh, God, Yahweh, our God. Okay. Belteshazzar, his new name is still God is my judge, but it's a different God. It's a Babylonian God, Marduk. Hananiah meant Yahweh has been gracious. Shadrach meant under the command of Marduk. So that king God that they have, okay? Mishael means who is like God, and the God there is El Elyon, which is the first name of God in Genesis 1:1. El Elyon, okay? That's the plural triune God, okay? And then Meshach means who is like Aku, which is another one of the Babylonian gods. Azariah, Yahweh has helped, and Abednego means slave of Nebo or Nabu, another Babylonian god. So that's to answer the question. I think Darla asked that question last week. So Darla, there you go. Bonnie. Yep. Darla, it's a new person. So verse 24, Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery that he's asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. So Daniel now knew the secret of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. When brought before the king again, who did Daniel tell him was the author of the dream? God himself, the God of heaven, Yahweh God. And what was the dream's purpose? To show him future. Yeah, to show him the future. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries and has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the days to come. All right, so that's what's going on here. So I think it's really cool, and it's very telling what kind of person Daniel is. Daniel says, I know your dream and I know the interpretation because I am great. No, he immediately points Nebuchadnezzar to the one and only God. Why does he call him the God of heaven? To differentiate between who?
Their God. Any of those gods.
Their gods are created by man. The God of heaven created man.
They don't have a God in heaven.
They've got the God of the fish, and the God of the water, the God of the land, and the God of the crops. They don't have a creator God. Okay, that's why when Paul, the Apostle Paul, went to Athens and saw on the mountain all of these altars that were set up for all of the gods. And there was one that said to the unknown God, he said, ha, here's my chance. Hey, I know who the unknown God is. And he lays out creation, because there is no God of creation in Roman or Greek mythology.
Don't they have the god that, the turtle that holds the world on his back?
That was Egypt.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an Egyptian god. So verse 32, the head of the statue. So now he's talking about this vision. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. My mind is reeling. I know the rest of the story. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on the threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Okay, so that's the dream. So, what had the king seen? So, we've got a statue here that has a head, chest and arms, belly and thighs, legs and feet. What was the head made out of? That was gold. The chest and arms, silver. The belly and thighs, bronze. The legs, iron. And the feet, iron and clay. Now I need you to start thinking your ancient world history. Okay. You remember how they talked about ages in world history? Okay. They said that there was the Iron Age, there's the Bronze Age, right? So this is a statue that's representing ages. Gold was just dug up out of the earth, and it is as it is. Okay, very precious, but it just comes as gold. Gold does not react with anything else, and so it's dug out of the ground, and it's pure in its elemental form when it's dug out of the ground. Silver has to be worked a little bit before it is pure, because silver does react with other things. But early metallurgy, they had the ability to heat up that silver ore and refine it and get the silver out of it pretty easily. It was easy. But by the time we get to the Bronze Age, now we have to already have refined these base metals and then combine the base metals in certain proportions in order to get bronze. And bronze was much stronger than the base metals that it's made out of. So there's more progress that has happened at that point. By the time we get to iron, even more so. There's more technology, more science, more refining that has to happen in order to get iron. But then something weird happened. There's kind of a step backwards in getting to iron and clay. But when you think about the clay in history, this clay is now referring to the arts, clay pottery. Okay, so now as you're working through history, this is what's being laid out by this statue. It's a timeline. And instead of saying in the year such and such, it has to do with their ability to refine things. All right, so there's our statue. Mhm.
So that, to the pottery stage, that would be like 1800s, maybe, or.
No, they did pottery in the ancient world as well.
Is there anything this year for art?
Patience, young Padawan. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It is coming. It is coming. All right. Verse 36. This was the dream. And now we will interpret it to the king. So now he had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with him. It's not a royal we. It was the four friends who are like 20. They're 20 years old. Yeah, they're young. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. Okay, so there's a reference, I can't remember which version of the Bible. Some of y'all may have it in your Bibles. It says, you King of Kings. That King of Kings usually we use to talk about Jesus, right? Capital K, King of Kings. But when it's used in reference to Nebuchadnezzar, it's because he was an emperor. And what is an emperor? He is a king over many kingdoms that each have their own king. Okay, so he's an emperor. And so that's what that's referring to there. All right, so Daniel's off to a good start here. He's got some flattery going on. Okay, so he's going to love all this stuff that Daniel is telling him. And you are that head of gold because you rule over everything. Okay, so that's what he's saying here. So who was represented by the head, the gold head? That is King Nebuchadnezzar. So remember that's spelled Nebuchad, Chad, Nezar, Nezzar, Nebuchadnezzar. All right. Over which empire was he the ruler? Babylonian. So this head of gold is representing their current day and time that Daniel's talking about. This head of gold is the Babylonian Empire that we are living in.
This is only his
right
third
now.
year reign.
It'll be, yeah, sometime within those first 3 years.
And he reigns.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Now that we're talking timeline here. All right. So this head of gold represents Babylon. All right. So I've got it at the bottom of that slide there. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom lasted from 605 BC to 538 BC. Okay, so 80 years. Actually 70, because that falls into Jeremiah's prophecy.
Don't.
It's 70 years because Jeremiah said that they would be captive in Babylon for 70 years. All right. So I got to give you some facts about Babylon. So I had to Google yesterday, had to rely on Wikipedia a little bit. Okay. So the name means gate of the gods. This is important. The earliest mention in history is 2217 BC, and it was referred to as the small village of Babel. That's where the tower was. So why would it be called the gate of the gods?
Is this like in the Greek area?
No, Iran, Iraq, actually, Baghdad area.
This has nothing to do with like Greek gods. That's completely different.
Yeah, that's later, much later than this. Okay, so think about this. People built this tower, and their idea to build the Tower of Babel was so that they could touch God. Okay, God says, no, you're not going to do that. He confuses their languages, and so they all have to scatter out, and the temple was unfinished. This tower remained unfinished. Okay, there's still ruins, by the way. All right, but this place of Babel, this small village of Babel, then became a very strong demonic place. And so it became Gate of the Gods, because this would be like Buffy and the Vampire Slayer, it'd be the Hellmouth. Okay, this was a place where this would be a place where demons could actually emerge and bad stuff happen. Okay. This is Baghdad, people. It's Baghdad. This is the largest city of the world from 612 to 320 BC. Probably the first to reach a population over 200,000. Okay, so this became the center of the world during this era. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were listed by the early Greeks as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Okay, this hand-colored engraving, probably made in the 19th century, after the first excavations in the Assyrian capitals, Baghdad, depicts the fabled Hanging Gardens with the Tower of Babel in the background.
Yeah, but that still wouldn't have been there, would it?
Okay, ruins of it are still there. And so this was actually an artist's rendition of the ruins as they were found, what they might have looked like back in the days. When we think hanging gardens, we think like aeroponics and hydroponics with things hanging down from something.
Right.
That's not what it meant. It means terraced gardens, where things that you would normally find at ground level are now elevated at higher levels. Okay, so that's what that hanging gardens means. So you can see that we've got fruit trees and all kinds of stuff, flowering plants and everything way up on the higher levels. That's the hanging part of the gardens. So it was built by Nebuchadnezzar. And it was built for his wife, Amytis, because she missed the green hills and valleys of her homeland. So he built it for her so that she could have pretties that are above eye level. No, it doesn't look like that today. You looking at ruins? Yeah. So one of the things that, I lost his name. Saddam Hussein. One of the things that Hussein was doing was he was sacking other countries, stealing their treasury and using that to excavate Babylon. He wanted to rebuild Babylon because he considered himself Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated. So there was a whole demonic thing going on there. He was an antichrist of that generation. Okay.
That's when you use the missiles that could go in tunnels and stuff, right?
Bomb busters.
There you go.
Yeah. The bunker busters. Bunker busters. All right. Any questions yet? All right. Let's continue. Verse 39. After you, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, another kingdom will arise. By the way, it's inferior to yours. Okay. Yeah, a little more flattery. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. For iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. So, notice the other parts of the image. The chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, the legs of iron. So as you move down from the head, where are we going in the timeline? From ancient heading to current. Okay, so it is a timeline as you go down the statue, becoming more and more in the future for them,
Yes.
but current for us. So Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that these 3 metals represented 3 major kingdoms that would follow Babylon. According to history, what were these kingdoms? All right. So as we move to the torso of silver, this is the Persian Empire. Okay. They conquered Babylon in 538 BC.
15 years after the story.
Yeah.
began.
So what happens is Daniel actually remains in service of the Persian king. But that's going to be later in the book.
Okay.
So Daniel remains in service. Okay, then we get to the waist. This is the bronze kingdom. This kingdom represents the kingdom of Greece. All right, now I had to pull this in. Jacob, you're gonna love this. I had to. Y'all, the wars between the Persians and the Greeks, very well documented. Great history, very explicit history, and that history was written down so well, it became great screenplays for movies. Okay? A lot of the stuff that you see about ancient Greek warfare were these battles that happened between the Persians and the Greeks. So what I did here is I gave you some of the battles that were the downfall of the Persians. So the Battle of Marathon, that's 490 BC. We hear about that in the second 300 movie, which is Rise of an Empire. It's a prologue. The speaker is talking about how this person that's going to give us problems in this movie, how he got his start. Yep. And so we hear about the Battle of Marathon. That's 490 BC. The Battle of Thermopylae, that's 480 BC. That's actually what we see in the movie, The 300. The 300 Spartans stood against the entire army of the Persians with King Xerxes in charge. Yeah. So, but there are so many Persian archers that when they launched their arrows, that it would blot out the sun. And the Spartans, and it's written down, they said, well, we will just fight in the shade. Oh, man, that is a line. That is a line. Then we've got the Battle of Salamis. That's 480 BC. We see that in 300, The Rise of an Empire. That's the second 300 movie. Then the Sea Battle of Plataea. Great battle. That's also in 300, Rise of an Empire. The Battle of Mycale. That's in a movie that's on YouTube. It's a YouTube movie that was put together called The Battle of Mycale. And then we end up with Alexander the Great, who is a great Macedonian Greek general. And he comes in with his legions and just wipes out Persia. But by that time, because of all of these other battles, Persia didn't have much left. They had been whittled down over this time to where when Alexander the Great came in, he just marched through and took it all. Okay.
So was he considered in the bronze, right here where you are, the bronze part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then we get to the legs. This is the Iron of Rome. So Rome comes in, and there's a whole bunch of Rome-Greco wars. Rome took the Illyrian region, which is now Albania, in 230 BC. There is the Pyrrhic War, 280 through 275. Rome took the Epirotian territories in southern Greece. The First Macedonian War, 214 to 205 BC. That's a long war. That ended in a truce called the Peace of Phenice. The Second Macedonian War, 200 to 179 BC. That declared Greece's freedom from Macedonian rule. The Battle of Corinth, which is 146 BC. That's the last Macedonian stronghold, and that's the beginning of the Roman era. Okay. Right now, my college history professor is, if he's still alive, he's like, Steve Scott, who are you? And what did you do with that student that I failed? Okay. I hated history when I was in school. I get out of history and I'm like, man, this stuff is cool. Really cool stuff. So, but I think what really makes it go for me is that I see now how it fits in scripture. And that just makes it more tangible to me. It's weird. It fits in scripture, so it's more tangible to me.
Material to everyone else.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So the four metals then represents Babylon, Medo-Persia, bronze would be Greece, the iron would be Rome, and then we'll save the feet for later. No. No. Yeah, but I see, I told Stace yesterday, there's no way I can get through all of this today. So the feet is next week.
It's on the next page. You can do it. Come on.
There's so much more,
You've got
so much
5
more.
minutes.
All right, verse 41. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw the iron was mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. It doesn't. Okay, it doesn't. So the feet. So this odd mixture of the feet and toes, partly of iron, partly of clay. What did Daniel say the mixture of iron and clay meant? The kingdom will be divided. Okay, and a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So this last part of the statue is a very troubled kingdom that gets set up. Okay. The feet of iron and clay, this is the breakup of the Roman Empire. So this represents modern Europe. Okay, it's the breakup of the Roman Empire. Rome wasn't ever conquered by any other army. They just fell apart due to its own weight and its own corruption. But nobody could beat the Roman soldiers. But then it just got to the point where there was nothing for them to protect anymore. They couldn't be paid anymore. And so they just kind of just disbanded and fell apart. And it was the Roman Empire was replaced by individual states and individual nations that just kind of emerged out of the decline of the Roman Empire. So the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. So that I just gave you there was only half the story, though, because that is what happens geopolitically to Rome. But it matches what Daniel's interpretation says, because once Rome falls apart into these smaller countries, those countries can't get along. And all they've done is fight for territory and power ever since. There can be no peace until the next part of Daniel's prophecy happens. And it hasn't happened yet.
Israel and Hamas are fighting today.
Well, that's the Middle East. This is Europe that we're talking about. Okay. Next week,
Well,
the next part.
stay tuned.
Okay. So something else that you have to understand through history is now we need to start talking about church history as well. Because we mentioned Constantine before.
Yes.
Okay. So that's around 330 AD. Constantine, the Roman emperor, now brings in this idea of a state-run religion. That's where Christianity became a worldwide religion, Catholic, with a little c, Catholic, okay? Meaning the universal church. Everybody is now this religion, all right? But as he went around conquering places, he didn't tell them to give up their religion and now you have to become Christian. He said, ooh, you've almost got it right. So we're going to incorporate what you're doing into what we do, and we're just going to give your people new names. So instead of Ishtar, we're just going to call her Mary. And they renamed all of the foreign gods by giving them Christian names from Christianity. But at the same time, these people were bringing in their pagan practices, witchcraft, worship of idols, and calling that part of Christianity, which is why even today, the Catholic religion still does these things. It was set up as the oldest religion. My dad said that so many times. It's the oldest religion. They can't be wrong. Okay. Must have been taught by the same nuns. So what's going on here, though, is that now Rome is now two different kinds of Rome. We've got the old Rome of military strength, and now we've got a new Rome called the Roman Catholic Church. Iron and clay. Iron of strength, clay fashioned by man. And they don't mix. And so they separated, and for 1,000 years, no king of Europe was put on the throne without the blessing of church. The Pope crowned the kings. And so actually it was still Rome. They had the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was a religious establishment. But you still had a Rome of military strength that was falling apart. But the church got stronger and stronger. Okay, iron and clay. All right.
You get to the Knights Templar and all that.
Oh yeah, all that stuff. So Daniel predicted that they will not remain united with one another. So the church could not remain united with the Roman Empire. Just as iron does not mix with clay. There's no way they could keep that together. All right. So they will not adhere to one another. These 7 words have stood in the way of world unity for more than 1,500 years. And until the next part, we're not going to be able to keep it together. What am I doing? That's a good stopping point.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do next week now is I'm going to turn the corner out of world history. And now we're going to move into our future as part of Daniel's revelation. Okay. Any questions?
And you're gonna bring that diagram back that
Yeah.
we
So,
couldn't see very well.
right. Well, it's not quite time for that yet.
Oh.
Okay. But I'm going to, once I finish next week and then move into Revelation, then it's all going to start to become clear.
We're gonna start having full
Yeah,
color class.
I've got to, do we have ledger paper? Do we have ledger paper here? All right. So I got to probably take 2 ledger sheets and put it together so that it's big enough to be able to see. All right, cool. Any questions? Let me make my thing here better. Any of you online folks, you have any questions? They're still with us, so that means they could hear us. All right, cool. Well, then I am done for this morning. So y'all have a great day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll record it and have it posted as well.
Susan said thank you.
All right. Oh, we got chats. Yes, yes, yes. All right, they all heard. Good. Now that we're done.